My cruel stepfather insisted that I'd give his son $30 million from my father's estate so that he could start a business after my father's funeral. He smacked me across the face in front of his son after I refused, and I was afraid. However, he had no idea that I was plotting a vengeance that would shock him the following day. Currently residing in Dallas, Texas, I am a 21-year-old college student by the name of Isabella. Never in a million years did I imagine that the most joyful time of my life would also be the most difficult. I inherited a substantial fortune, exactly $130 million, from my father's untimely death. The idea was that this sum would set me up for the future and provide stability in a world where I felt vulnerable at times. But now it seemed more like an inconvenience than an advantage. Sarah, my mother, was a strong and kind woman in her early 40s who had been there for me through thick and thin. She had fought for stability ever since my father passed away. The loss of my father, who had been her first love, broke her heart. She often sat by herself, staring off into space as she reflected on the life they had created together. My stepfather, Samuel, who was in his mid-40s at the time, was wedded to her amongst the mayhem of her grief. Our relationship with Samuel, who had been a part of our life for a while, was tense. At first, he captivated everyone, but eventually, his real colors emerged. Samuel appeared to choose his reputation over that of my mother and myself. There seemed to be an intangible barrier separating us. It was awkward because he was often making fun of my decisions and my future plans. For my mom's sake, I did my best to maintain calm, but it was straining. My stepbrother Eric was also 21 years old. He and I were friends, but we kept our distance. On rare occasions, we would spend time together, but I always had the impression that he was more loyal to Samuel than to me. His desire to win over his father's approval made me suspicious of him. A single afternoon was the turning point. With an intense expression on his face, Samuel stormed into my room, causing me to feel uneasy. "Isabella, we must have a conversation," he stated with a forceful tone in his low voice. "About what?" Attempting to maintain an impartial tone, I inquired. "About your inheritance," he responded, folding his arms. My heart sank. "What about it?" "I think it's only fair that you give the entire amount to Eric," said the man. "He wants to start his own business, and he needs the funds." It caught me off guard. "I don't think you're kidding. My dad left me that money so I can be sure I'll be taken care of in the future." In response, Samuel scowled. "You're young. Managing that much money is beyond your expertise. Eric needs your help. You say, his plan's in motion." Anger washed over me. You have no idea what my father had in mind. I am not going to hand over my hard-earned cash to Eric for some nebulous business plan. Samuel's face became more glum. "Think you can put off taking care of your loved ones? You're being selfish," I said. "Are you being selfish? My future is at stake here. I'm standing firm to safeguard my father's legacy," I retorted, sensing the mounting tension. Only Samuel hadn't finished yet. His voice dipped to a frightening whisper as he advanced toward her. "That sum will be paid to Eric by you. It's really working out." He swung his hand up and gave me a solid face smack before I could even think to respond. I felt the pain radiate up my cheeks and the burn reverberated in my ears. Standing in the doorway, Eric was taken aback and gutted. In the face of Samuel's brutality, all I could muster was astonishment and a want to scream out in protest. "Leave," I choked out before it was too late. "You have no right to do this to me." A satisfied grin spread across Samuel's face as he smirked. He gave her a moment to consider it before getting up and storming out of the room. A wave of shame and wrath swept over me. I failed to grasp the behavior of the man who had been graciously invited into our home. I felt like everything was falling apart after that confrontation. No one could be trusted anymore. Using Eric as a pawn, my own stepfather was attempting to control me. Hours passed while I mentally relived our dispute and attempted to make sense of what had transpired. Anxiety consumed the following days. There seemed to be more going on behind the scenes, and I couldn't get rid of that feeling. Samuel's abrupt request for my bequests seemed too menacing and cold-hearted. I made up my mind that I needed to look into his actions more thoroughly. I started my investigation in the middle of the night, when nobody was home. I began by going through Samuel's belongings in an effort to deduce his genuine goals. I scoured his office for documents that might shed light on his business dealings with money. Research and restless nights consumed the days. Emails exchanged between Samuel and Lisa were discovered by me. I felt my stomach turn as they discussed some dubious topics. There were several references to investments that seemed excessively dangerous, and the word cryptocurrency cropped up often. I wanted further proof, but I had a feeling I was right. I had to exercise caution, though. My predicament would be worse if Samuel found out about my actions. I chose to confront him despite my beating heart. Should he be concealing anything? I had to know. "Samuel," I managed to utter one evening, my voice unsteady. "What do you really know about Eric's business plans?" His brow furrowed as he fixed his gaze on me. "What do you mean?" "I've been hearing things, I told you, things that make me question your intentions." Samuel's face became more angular. "You're going crazy. Eric needs your support because he has a good idea." "I don't think this is just about support," I responded, my voice filled with self-assurance. "If you're trying to manipulate me, I won't let you." With a low, menacing voice, he drew nearer. "Isabella, you have no idea what you're walking into. You should know better than to meddle in this family business." A shiver went down my spine, but I refused to budge. I was obligated to safeguard the legacy of my father. I felt like I had reached a turning point as I walked out of the room. Samuel couldn't have complete control over my life. I couldn't sit on my hands. If he was hiding anything, I needed to find out what it was. I was hell-bent on winning this fight, and it was only going to get worse from here. Days became a swirl of feelings, and nights became restless. My stepfather, Samuel, seemed to be the master manipulator, and I was ensnared in a nightmare-like situation. I could still feel the sting of his smack, a sobering reminder that he would resort to any means necessary to achieve his goals. I would no longer allow him to control me. I shifted my attention to Samuel's dubious activities since I was hell-bent on finding out the truth. In order to solve the mystery of his life, I devoted all of my free time to collecting evidence. Being a private investigator in my own house was an exciting and terrifying experience. Sarah, my mom, would get preoccupied with her own sorrow and forget about my dad on a frequent basis. I preferred not to bring up my suspicions with her at the moment. She already had a lot on her plate. As I was going through Samuel's emails, one night I came across something that made me shudder. A seemingly illicit cryptocurrency idea was discussed in an email thread. It was Samuel and Lisa's intention to start a company that would launder money through fictitious investments. It was unbelievable to me. His ability to pull this off is astounding. Why even bring Eric into it? Realizing I had to maintain secrecy, I hastily printed the emails. Things may go downhill for me if Samuel found out. I made sure the documents were in a secure location in my room so I could quickly find them when needed. I had to figure out a way to expose him, but I was at a loss as to what to do. It was that night that I made up my mind to face Eric. Unlike his father, I was hoping he would be more receptive to reality. Maybe he would assist me in exposing Samuel if he could perceive that he was being dishonest. In the living room, he was playing a video game when I spotted him. "Hey, Eric," I muttered in an attempt to appear amicable. "Isabella, come on." "Hi, what's up?" he asked, halting the game to meet my gaze. I said, "I wanted to talk about your dad," mincing my words carefully. Word on his business has been making the rounds. His involvement in something criminal is something I'm concerned about. Doubtful, Eric arched an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" Everything is new to me. As I anxiously awaited his response, I admitted, "I believe he's attempting to utilize my inheritance for a cryptocurrency scheme." I saw contemplation on his face, but also a hint of doubt in his gaze. No way would Dad do that. He hopes he can be of use to us. Help us, I spoke out in disbelief. Eric, he's trying to steal my money. This is about more than just family. It's about the law. The words "I don't believe you" came out of his mouth as his irritation level rose. Just say no. I push the point that you've witnessed his behavior. If you care about our family at all, you need to look deeper. Samuel, who was wearing a somber expression, materialized in the doorway before Eric had a chance to reply. He abruptly cut us off in the middle of our discussion and demanded, "What's going on here?" "Nothing," Eric said, moving uneasily. "Are you sure?" Samuel glanced between us, his pupils constricting. "Isabella, you're not causing trouble, are you?" A sense of mounting stress washed over me. I looked Samuel in the eye and said, "I'm just trying to protect what's mine. You should be the one worried about the trouble you're causing." Samuel advanced, his countenance betraying an air of menace. "Your knowledge is completely lacking. You don't have what it takes." I was adamant and would not budge. "You can't intimidate me, Samuel. I am not bequeathing this to you or anybody else. It is my heritage." My heart was thumping as I spun around and strode away. I had to move swiftly. I lost faith in Eric's ability to back me up. Going back to my room, I felt my anger building up. I was extremely lonely, but I was also hell-bent on finding out what had happened. My determination to seek justice only grew stronger as time went on. I contacted Jessica, a reliable college acquaintance of mine, who was pursuing a legal degree. At the coffee shop where we met, I told her my whole tale, including all the information I had uncovered. "This is serious, Isabella," Jessica exclaimed, her expression betraying her shock. "You need to gather all your evidence and find a lawyer who can help you." Indeed, I concurred, a wave of relief washing over me. "I require additional evidence, although I have previously printed the emails. I intend to reveal his true nature to the world." With a grave look on her face, Jessica nodded. "Here's a strategy. We may review all of your materials and determine the next steps." I felt re-energized and focused after our meeting. Collecting any and all information pertaining to Samuel's transactions was something I embarked on with Jessica's assistance. Looking for any indication of misbehavior, I combed through his office's papers and paperwork. I became more determined with each new revelation. As I was going through his documents one night, I came upon a folder that said "Investments." Within were Excel documents containing unfamiliar names and numbers. As I perused the papers, my pulse quickened as I realized they included details about several cryptocurrency accounts and questionable transactions. I had hit the jackpot. This proved to Samuel that he was not who he claimed to be. To make sure I had a backup copy of the paperwork, I shook my hand and snapped a photo with my phone. I had to move quickly because Samuel might have easily destroyed them if he discovered. I was filled with both anticipation and dread as I made my way back to my room. At last I was nearing the truth, but I was also entering perilous terrain. Samuel was a master manipulator, so I had to tread carefully. My plans were too secretive for me to tell him about them. My thoughts were racing as I lay in bed that night, fixated on the ceiling. In that instant, I experienced both the crushing burden of the world and a flicker of optimism. I was standing firm, and I would stop at nothing to preserve the heritage of my father. After gathering all of the necessary proof, I realized it was time to move forward. I contacted Jessica once more, excited to report my results. We met at the coffee shop, where my anxiousness was mingled with the familiar aroma of coffee. I felt like I was balancing precariously between two extremes, my need for justice and my fear of Samuel's reaction to my plot. As I passed the folder across the table, I said, "Jessica, I found something huge. All of Samuel's cryptocurrency transactions are detailed in this page. Some really nefarious things are happening with him." The more Jessica leafed over the pages, the wider her eyes grew. "I can't believe it, Nan. Now that we have this evidence, we can consult an attorney. We can take legal action and ensure that he is held accountable for his actions. I felt a rush of adrenaline. At last, I was making my own decisions. I need to be careful. I want to set up a meeting with a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes. I continued. My safety could be jeopardized if Samuel finds out. I get it. Jessica responded with a calm tone. We'll keep this under wraps until we have everything lined up. I couldn't escape the sinking sensation in my gut as we completed our arrangements. I needed to confront my stepfather soon, but I preferred to do so in a way that was convenient for me and supported by good facts. Immediately following our encounter, I set out to get ready for what was to come. I contacted Mr. Thompson, an attorney well known for his work in financial fraud cases. A meeting at his workplace was set up after a few nervous days. It was odd to step into the modern structure downtown. Artwork decorated the walls, and the aroma of freshly polished wood wafted through the room. To greet me, Mr. Thompson shook my hand firmly and smiled reassuringly. It's great to have you here, Isabella. Let's dive in headfirst. It was clear that he was processing all I had told him as I gave him the evidence I had collected. His expression changed to one of grave gravity as he examined the paperwork in detail. If what you're saying is true, we can build a strong case against your stepfather and his accomplices. I felt a wave of seriousness from his remarks. I simply wish to safeguard my father's heritage, I said, my voice quivering. Samuel thinks he can manipulate me, but I won't let him. A nod was given by Mr. Thompson. We'll make sure he understands the consequences of his actions. I felt a growing sense of strength as we planned our next move. I had been manipulated by Samuel for a long time, but now I was the one in power. I couldn't help but fantasize about the sensation of exposing him, of finally telling my mother the truth about the guy she wed. The wheels of destiny were turned. Until we were prepared to submit our case, Mr. Thompson emphasized that I should not face Samuel directly and that my findings should remain confidential. I consented since I knew it was essential for my own protection. As I made my way home that night, my thoughts wandered back to the events of the day. There was an overwhelming sense of foreboding. I could feel a storm on the horizon. I was worried about Samuel's reaction when he saw I wasn't going to back down, as he was getting more and more irrational. Upon my return home, I discovered Eric in the living room, serving as a diversion from my train of thinking. He glanced up from his phone and said, "Hey, Isabella. What's up?" I said, "Not much," attempting to come out as unconcerned. "Just studying." He gave a little nod before asking, "Are you and Dad okay?" His behavior has been peculiar as of late. When deciding how much to divulge, I was hesitant. "Just some family stuff," I murmured incoherently. Concerned, Eric refrained from pressing the issue any further. With genuine sincerity, he added, "If you need to talk, I'm here." "Thanks, Eric," I said under my breath like a pretzel. This was more than just a family dispute, though. Seeking justice and safeguarding my father's legacy were paramount. That night, I was filled with a mixture of hope and fear as I made my way into bed. I was prepared to fight as the war was about to start. I was filled with both anticipation and fear as the day of the courtroom battle drew near. I had spent weeks getting ready for this, but now that it had really arrived, I couldn't escape the mounting fear that had been building up inside. The courthouse was a colossal structure that hung over me like the burden of my situation. My heart was racing as I approached it. Having Jessica there to reassure me that I wasn't fighting this battle alone was a huge relief when we met outdoors. She told me, "You've got this, Isabella," as she put her comforting hand on my shoulder. "Just stay focused on the evidence and remember why you're doing this." The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with tension as we entered. People were milling about in the waiting room, some of them nervous and others optimistic. I noticed Samuel and Eric sitting side by side, their faces betraying a blend of superiority and unease. Samuel appeared anxious today, in contrast to his normally self-assured demeanor. The wall seemed to be closing in on him, maybe. I could feel my heart racing when our case was called. There was an air of command in the courtroom as the judge sat high above the bench and gazed down on the assembled crowd. With a sigh, I held on to the folder that contained all the proof I had collected. This was my chance to start over. Standing by my side, Mr. Thompson brought me down to earth. He muttered, "You'll do great," as we walked up to the plaintiff's table. So we did. The judge then gave an address to the court, and the proceedings commenced. Financial fraud and manipulation accusations are the reason for our meeting today. It is your right to argue this matter, Miss Isabella. Taking the stand meant carrying on my father's legacy, and I was no stranger to that burden. Despite my beating heart, I managed to keep my voice steady as I introduced myself as Isabella and stated my intention to expose my stepfather's dishonesty. Samuel has been using my inheritance to fund illegal activities, including a cryptocurrency scheme. The courtroom was watching me with a mix of interest and support. I went on to explain what had happened leading up to this point, stressing the brutality I had suffered at Samuel's hands. I presented the judge with the hard copies of the communications and bank records. In these emails, Samuel and his accomplice Lisa discussed several topics. They're arranging for funny investments to be used as a means of money laundering. As more and more proof became apparent, Samuel's face changed from one of certainty to one of skepticism. "Objection," he yelled, attempting to reclaim his composure. "This is all hearsay." But Mr. Thompson did not budge. "Your Honor, these documents are verifiable evidence of the defendant's illegal activities." The judge gave the go-ahead for the evidence to be presented with a nod. As Samuel's act fell apart, his bluster faded, and the real him, the one who had taken advantage of my family's trust, became apparent. After, Eric had to give his testimony. I prayed he would see the light and say what's on his mind. I suppressed a gasp as he mounted the platform. "I've been perplexed by my dad's business," he confessed, casting a glance on Samuel. "I thought he was just trying to help Isabella, but now I see things differently." Eric persisted despite Samuel's enraged expression. "I refuse to participate in this any longer. Isabella has my support." Everyone went silent. It was a turning point, and things started to turn in my favor. As Samuel felt he was losing command of his kid and the situation, his wrath flared up. My spirits lifted as the trial continued. The more proof there was that Samuel's manipulation was going to fall apart, the more obvious it seemed. I rushed outside with Jessica as soon as the judge signaled a break, my pulse pounding with excitement. "We're going to win this, aren't we?" My voice had a hint of skepticism as I inquired. Confidence radiating from Jessica, she grinned. "You've been absolutely spot on, Isabella. Permit the decision to be announced." The air was thick with tension as we made our way back to the courtroom. Looking solemn, the judge came back. "After reviewing the evidence and testimonies presented, I have come to a decision." As I awaited the life-altering words, I held my breath. Samuel, Eric, and Lisa are found guilty of financial fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. I was overcome with a wave of relief. Eric appeared completely defeated, while Samuel's expression contorted with a mix of wrath and amazement. To which the court said, "You will face the consequences of your actions." I was in disbelief at the suddenness of the event when the gavel fell. I had defeated the man who had sought to control me, and now my father's legacy would be secure. As I sat that evening with Jessica and my mom, a tidal wave of emotions surged through me. I exclaimed, "I can't believe it's finally over," my eyes welling up with tears of relief. In a protective embrace, Sarah encircled me. My, Isabella, you are daring. You have my admiration." I had come out stronger and more resilient, and I knew that even though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, I was ready. I had taken control of my life again, and Samuel and his henchmen were in prison. I was prepared to carry on my father's legacy and create a future characterized by optimism and honesty with my mother's support. The worst part had ended.